This is a production of Cornell University.
It's March 11th, 2014, and we have had a very cold winter. I'm at the Lansing Research Farm. We hit -10 here on January 22nd, and then had several other instances where we went below zero. So Adam and I are out here cutting buds to see what's alive and what's dead. And so I wanted to show you how this process works. And so what we do is we use a razor blade and cut away at buds and look at what's alive inside. And so we're going to zoom up on a bud here. And you need to remember that grape buds are what we call compound buds. And so within each bud that we cut, there's actually a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary bud. And I found a great example here for what's alive. So what I've done is come in here, and that's what the bud looked like. I sliced it with the razor blade, opened it up, and you can actually see the three buds here. This center one is the primary, and there's the secondary, and then there's a little green dot over here, and that's the tertiary bud. So this is great. We can look at the other side of the bud here too, and you can see those green dots. Those are buds that are still alive after this winter. They all have the potential to produce shoots. So what will happen is the primary will grow first, and as long as it grows well, it's unlikely the secondary or the tertiary will ever grow. If we move up the cane here is another bud that I cut. And in this, you can see that the center of that is actually brown. And so that's our primary bud. The primary bud is dead. It's been damaged by the cold, but you can see a little bit of green on either side of that. That's the secondary and the tertiary, and those are both alive. So this is what we do pre-pruning if we've had some cold damage, is that we go through, we actually cut these buds with a razor blade, and look at what proportion are alive and what proportion are dead. Because that will tell us how many buds we want to leave on the vine. Because I'll know, for example, that to balance this vine, I want to have, in this example, maybe about 30 live shoots. But if I cut these, and I know that only about half of them are alive, that means I actually need to leave 60 nodes, rather than 30, to get my 30 shoots through the growing season. So in many years, if we haven't had cold damage, we don't bother doing this. But in a year like this, where we're seeing a lot of damage in the Finger Lakes, we go through and cut some buds first so we get a sample and figure out what's alive and what's dead, so we know how many more buds we need to leave when we do our pruning. So it's March 11th, 2014. And I'm in the Lansing vineyard. We've had a very cold winter, and we've had some bud damage that I wanted to show you. So I've cut some buds here, and this is something that we frequently do before pruning if we've had cold events, because we want to see how many of our buds are alive and how many of our buds are dead. Because the number of buds we're going to leave on a vine, we'll know the number we need to have a balanced vine. For example, it might be 30 in this situation. And so if I know half the buds are dead, I've got to leave 60 buds so that I have 30 shoots. So I've cut some buds here, and I wanted to show you. You need to remember that grape buds are actually compound buds. And so within every bud, there's actually 3 smaller buds. And this is one where everything's dead. But you can see a bigger set of circles here. That's the primary bud. This is the secondary bud, and this little one over here, this little wedge, is called the tertiary bud. And on this one, when we cut it open, all 3 are dead. So the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary are all brown. Nothing is growing from that bud this year. The second one here, it's a little harder to see because the primary, secondary, and tertiary are actually alive here. So this little middle green point here, this is our primary bud. It's alive and well. If I had not cut it, it would grow into a shoot. There is our secondary bud, and there is our tertiary over here, which is alive too. So normally it's the primary that will die first, so it's easy to find buds here where the primary is dead, but the secondary is alive. And in that case, the secondary bud would actually grow and be a shoot. In many cases, it's not as fruitful as a primary shoot. The fruit will come out a couple of weeks later, and so it has less time to mature through the growing season. Sometimes it won't be a fruitful shoot, but at least there'll be a shoot there if the secondary is alive and the primary is not. But in this case, we're hoping to find lots of buds like this because we want to see an alive primary, secondary, and tertiary bud.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.